My day job. I am proud to serve and honored to work with you guys. As you know, I do enjoy it. So, when we were working on getting prepared for the summer forum, one of the things that we wanted to do was figure out, okay, how do we land and how do we talk about where do we go from here? It is great to hear, Rob, about all the continuity that happened through the day. So Weedy put on yet another tremendous, informative, and useful forum today, right? And I think starting out with Steve Posnack on the Healthcare Challenge 2030, I really tried to unpack that, and I love the idea of now we're focusing on outcomes, not interoperability itself, but the value of interoperability and the outcomes, recognizing the interdependencies and the importance of ensuring workflow integrity, in fact, making it even better. And then Stephen's points about making the value measurable and taking incremental steps. It is so well thought out and I think really inspirational to all of us. And then when Tim Kaya talked about smarter operations through AI, I love the idea of applied intelligence because there's nothing really artificial about it. And then when Viet started describing the value of fire, and I think it's time. And it's really an emerging lingua franca, meaning a common language for us all to use as we communicate all these things. And then the team about the point of care, where it all comes together that Dave led. Okay. And never forget about the back office because it is not going away. It is changing, but it is not going away. And then the idea, which we are starting to see in other parts of the industry, of predictability. I would argue that the next frontier is going to show up sooner than we think, especially if we have an infrastructure like this. So, what a fabulous program that's been put on. And what does this really tell us? These times they're changing, okay? And where does this lead us? And most importantly, where are we going to lead the industry going forward? Next slide, Michael, please. So one of the things that and Dave and Rob and I and others spend a lot of time together, and one of the things we've been thinking about, and when you step back and look at this, is the convergence of the whys, right? What can administrative automation do to create a triple aim that creates value for the patient foremost, but also value to the provider and the payer? And what that drives us to do is think about that and think about those whys for each of those constituents and make choices, choices of technology, choices of policy influencing and dialogue. And most importantly, and I can't emphasize this one enough, choices in collaboration. We all live in some forms of healthcare ecosystems, so we have to collaborate. It's not a nice to have. It's a foundational must have. Is one of the things that the three of us, as the co-chairs, talk about and are working now with you all to try to facilitate. Next slide, please, Michael. So we've done a lot of studying and surveying as an industry over the years, and Weedy's done a great job of adding some research. And in we're in between two worlds with one foot in each canoe, if you will, on fee for service. It's not gone away as we transition to value-based care. So in our research for free fee for service, it was abundantly clear in previous sessions we've had that prior authorizations and attachments were where we needed to focus our work, which is great and true and necessary. However, the world is not quite that simple anymore with the many flavors and varieties of value based care contracting and delivery, which creates needs for expressing and exchanging gaps in care or gaps in coding, ensuring provider network integrity for contracting entities or payers themselves. Patient engagement, if you're going to get quality, you better have patient engagement or you can't sustain it. We all know that. And last but not least, we started to coin the term practice burnout because it isn't just physician burnout, too. the administrative burden of the varieties of information that are necessary in VBC are creating new trends. So we need to not only do what we have committed to do and working on for prior auths and attachments, but we have to think about the whatabouts in this new world. And so we have to ask ourselves, is it FFS or VBC? Is it and? Is it both? And the real question for every organization in the industry is what's right for you. So it made me think about some life lessons that we've all probably learned in our lives. And for those of you who might know me, I am a huge fan of literature because it teaches us so much. So I found this little piece that I thought was pretty instructive as it helps us tell our story. So next slide, please, Michael. So the great mathematician Charles Dodson, right, also known as Lewis Carroll, wrote a great book called Alice in Wonderland. And one day Alice came to a fork in the road, like we are, and saw a Cheshire cat in a tree and asked the cat, hey, which road do I take? And he said, well, where do you want to go? She goes, I don't know. And he said, then it doesn't matter. But I think it really matters for us to be smart about the road or roads that we choose. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to end this one and then start to open up with dialogue with our colleagues here. I think it's very clear for everybody that their journey is their journey. Your journey is yours within your ecosystem. As we've studied this and talked through it and talked with so many, and it's great, again, Rob, to hear the continuity, everybody has to think about their own end game. What are they trying to accomplish? And also looking around the ecosystem, right? Who are your key trading partners and where should you focus with the people with whom you have contracts or with whom you care or how you collaborate in care delivery ways? There are many shared pain points. What are the key ones? What are the ones that are causing the most pain and when solved can create the most value for you? I think we had some great dialogue earlier last week about, how new technologies are defining the art of the doable. We have more choices to make and more opportunities ahead that we think are really important. And then using the above to create your specific value propositions based on what you're trying to do in an incremental way, along the lines of what Steve Posnick talked about. And we would like to remind ourselves of the triple aim, what's good for patients, payers, and providers. That confluence is a really important thing. So then we could, when we know those things, perhaps propose a good start with your partners, whoever they may be, and make sure, I can't stress this enough, to have coordinated user changes to make their lives better, to reduce some of that burnout, and make sure that we measure the value, because that will only teach us where the next plateau or next milestone of value can be. And again, as Rob reminded me, this is my day job. Please don't tell the investors that, but I'm really committed to work with us all together to find ways to help, to make the right convening, to work with the right industry parties, partners, leaders, people with boots on the ground. This is doable, but this must be done locally. So please, let's open up the dialogue. I'll toss it back to you, Rob and Dave, for further comment. And that's what we're here to discuss now. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for teeing that up. And we've had many conversations within the AATG, and we think there's a lot of opportunity. But I want to turn first, before I speak, I want to hear from Dave.
Well, thank you both. Again, my name is Dave Haugen. I'm part of the automation task force that Rob and John have mentioned. I've been impressed, I think, by a number of things that I heard today. You mentioned at one point in your remarks, John, you used the phrase, I think, continuity. And I've been amazed at the variety of activities, the sort of bootstrapping efforts that we were seeing today by a wide variety of different presenters about how they're approaching this broken knowledge supply chain and what they're doing to correct it. And yet at the same time, I was a little bit impressed that the more things change, the more they're still the same. We heard again reminders about the problems of prior authorization and attachments as being kind of a focal point. Also, perhaps indicating maybe a starting point for some of these community collaborative efforts that John was describing just now. And also the idea that there's plenty of starting points. The idea of looking for small wins or low-hanging fruit, really demonstrating the ROI, really demonstrating the value of fixing some of those problems and moving forward. So I really liked today from the standpoint that I was kind of inspired by all of the new advanced technology, all of the changes, whether it's artificial intelligence or machine learning or other things that we were hearing about. But I was also struck by the repeated themes I was hearing about kind of being practical at the same time. So I'm seeing that as kind of a different form of being in two canoes at the same time, being aspirational and looking forward, embracing some really wonderful opportunities that both you, John, and Rob have alluded to, but also at the same time being practical enough to have those canoes balanced and going forward. So that's a quick take on some of the things that were highlights for me today.
And I'll just add, I'll start with the beginning of the program with Steve. He has called on the industry to kind of look ahead at 2030 to say, hey, what is it going to look like? And 2030 seems so far away that the way that we look at it, we may say, oh, we're going to have all our problems solved. So what I did is I looked back 9 years and said, how far have we come since 2012 to 2021? And I'll just reference the Meaningful Use Program, which had just gotten underway. And if you think about the billions of dollars that was spent, was it well spent? Well, that's an argument. But I think what we can say is that it took a paper-based medical record system and digitized those records. The question becomes, is that good enough? Is it simply good enough to be able to have those records now in a computer? The answer is, of course, no. That the next step, and really what I hope will happen, is that we take those computers and we use them. And I think we need to think about some of the talking points that we heard today. I think Steve used the word, we need to give people superpowers by leveraging computers the way they need to be used, not just as repositories of data, but be able to use them in the type of function that we heard throughout the day, especially you seen AI. But if I had to boil the day down to a theme, it's a combination of putting data to work and converting data to knowledge. I think I heard that throughout the day. It's not good enough just to throw a lot of data at a physician. They need to have it curated. They need to have it prioritized. And we heard, I think it was from Tim, of the relatively short amount of time that a physician has with a patient. And if they get a PDF that is 300 pages long, it will not be read. So if we have the ability to give the right data at the right time to the right person, that is going to revolutionize healthcare. And so Tim also used the term augmented intelligence instead of artificial intelligence, because he made a point of saying, we're not going to replace the clinician, but we can do is help them by giving them the right data at the right time. And I was also struck by something else Tim said, which was half of the savings, the administrative savings, would come from computer decision support. So when John talks about low-hanging fruit and making some actions that are going to make a difference quickly, that is one area I think that has a lot of promise. And it also, I think, reflects back on what we're calling the triple aim, the win-win-win for the patient, the provider, and the payer, because something like CDS and real-time point-of-care solutions have the ability to give the clinician the information that they need to have a conversation with the patient to make sure the care is right for the patient at the right price, but also it is delivered in the right facility, and it is the right thing in terms of what the payer is going to pay for. So if we can achieve those aims, I think we can have a wonderful look back when we get to 2030 to say, boy, we made an enormous improvement in the environment, more so than we've made perhaps in the last 9 years. And John?
Sorry, I had to unmute. I'm super struck by, the comments you brought over from Tim about augmented intelligence. And this is why when Dave and Rob and I were thinking, and Charles as well, thinking about, the session this summer, the knowledge supply chain becomes a critical element, right? But it has to be relevant, it has to be useful, it has to be timely, and it has to be trusted. So I think when I step back and think about this, and it says Weedy is here to help, love to start to hear from you all about how we can help you, help all of us really start your journeys, because everybody's is going to be, related to their ecosystem, and who are the partners around you where we can start to bring and get access to that knowledge, because there's incredible amounts more available knowledge today than there was just 2 or 3 years ago. How do we provide that in the right way? So my thinking, Rob and Dave, is to start to engage the community and start to convene some thought leaders and execution teams together to write a playbook. Let's write the playbook on how to do this, because this is A, doable, and B, really must be done. So how do we do this? So I'm open for dialogue from anyone here. Rob, Dave, how do we, think about getting this fantastic community together to basically write the playbook of how we're going to take the steps forward to really fix the knowledge supply chain? And I think there's a lot of good stuff coming tomorrow as well. Gentlemen?
Well, thanks, John. I think I really liked your remarks, Rob, and the idea of imagining ourselves in 2030 when things are better and looking back and really asking ourselves, how did we get here? And if we could imagine that as a community, putting ourselves in 2030 where the world has improved and asking ourselves what's improved and how did that happen, and step backwards from that, do some reverse planning. It's kind of the roadmap, Rob, that you've been describing, or John, that you've been describing, sort of in reverse. But maybe that's a good place for some community discussion and some community brainstorming, and maybe just rolling up our sleeves a little bit with the balance between the practical and the aspirational, and really think about where should we be at 2030? How would we respond to Steve's survey or his gathering of that information? And then to really just practically step back from that point to say, what does it take? How do you get there? That might be a great discussion, I think.
Dave, I think you're 100% right. And you mentioned this earlier in the day. You said we're trying to identify nirvana, right? Mm-hmm. We're trying to identify an end state where everybody is happy with the process. So, of course, we're picking on prior authorization. And we want nirvana to be where the patient gets the right care at the right time, at the right place, and that the health plan has all the information they need, and the provider it has easy access to that information. And what I think strikes me is, as you said, the reverse engineering approach, where we can all agree on the end goal. Then the question is backing out to say what things have to happen to achieve that, and for each of the three parties. And I think that's going to be one of the tasks for WEDI, is to look at that and say, what is the pathway to get to where we all want to be and need to be. But we do have an issue in this industry because there are two pathways to change. There's the pathway of what I would call volunteer change, where we see the value. And then there's the pathway of being forced to change through a government mandate. And we have tended to kind of sit back and wait for somebody to tell us what to do, to tell us which standards to use, to tell us what the workflows should be. And I think those days are over. I'm not convinced that the government has all of the answers that are going to solve all of our problems. They may have some, and it will be helpful. But I think one of the things that the AATG has decided to take on is to identify what I would call industry leaders or industry innovators, folks that have established some best practices, and shine a very bright light on them to say, oh, this health plan is doing it in this way, or this vendor offers a unique solution. Because I think what we're all looking for is somebody to take the lead, to tell us it can be done and how it should be done, and then we're able to follow. I don't know, Dave, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, Rob. And, I think there's a variety of roles that government can play. I happen to work in state government. And so I've seen situations where government can be a leader and a follower and also a collaborator. And so I think there's plenty of room for all of us to really sit down and think about this together and do that kind of reverse planning, that reverse engineering to get us to the ultimate goal. I don't think there's a lot of dispute about the ultimate goal, Rob. I think you laid that out pretty well. And I think it's just time to really start thinking about how to get there. And as you say, there's a lot of people that are already moving in that direction. We had a lot of evidence in our presentations today about a lot of energy and a lot of creative effort that's going on already.
Absolutely. So in the last couple of minutes, I don't know, maybe we'll go around and say, are there one or two things that you see as sort of next steps for the industry, next steps for the WEDI AATG group? John?
Well, I'm glomming on to the idea. I think about maybe based on what happened today and what's going to happen tomorrow, perhaps we can go back to Steve with a thoughtful process on how to gather all this energy, focus it, and organize it, much along the lines, Rob, that you talked about. Establish your end game, what needs to happen before that, all the way back to where we are today, to create a roadmap that many can follow. I think if we can, I'm pretty sure Steve would welcome that kind of public-private collaboration to really figure out how do we get to where we need to go from where we are today. He's putting out the call for action. So let's maybe think about offering him a framework under which to organize those actions to make real and sustainable progress and with results.
How's that?
John, I would second the motion, but I would also say, even if Steve hadn't offered this opportunity, I think it still merits doing. I think it's a great activity regardless.
Yes.
So the fact that it can also serve two purposes, and also inform Steve's effort that he was describing in his presentation today is great. But it sounds to me like something that's really worth doing regardless, and really kind of an essential first step.
And Dave, your extraordinary insights from a state government perspective, I think, and the attitude and aptitude of Minnesota are real, highlights and points of light to help guide us along the way. I think there's a lot of doability and practicality inherent in your state and with your leadership. So there's a formula for success here that we need to pull together, and I think that's our job.
And I'll just add that the one thing that I've learned studying healthcare policy is the government is rarely out well ahead of the industry. They're very unlikely to mandate standards that aren't being used, that folks do not have experience with. So they're also looking for direction from the industry. And I think that applies not just to ONC, but also to CMS. We've seen that with the recent request for comment from the National Committee on Violent Health Statistics. So I think it's our job to be leaders and to essentially tell the government what we need, because we may need some guardrails to go forward, but we need to tell them what those rails look like. And I think that should be a priority for the industry, certainly a priority for Weedy. So we'll close here. Maybe any last comments, John or Dave?
I just want to thank all of the presenters and attendees at all of the sessions today. I really valued everything I was hearing, and I'm really looking forward to tomorrow as well. So I guess I just have to say thanks, everybody.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. And I would also like to thank Charles and Rob and Michael and Samantha and the rest of the Weedy team for putting on such a thoughtful program. You guys have always been leaders, but you're not even slowing down. So thank you for what you guys do, and for reminding me, Rob, what my day job really is.
Congratulations on your new job.
Woohoo! Okay. Okay.
Very good.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll expect to see the LinkedIn announcement come through.
Yes, sir. Okay.
So,
thank you.
I wanted to invite Charles to help with the closeout.
Yes, thank you and good afternoon. Great session, and I want to thank each of the speakers today. Has been a great session. I also have special thanks to those who put the program together, and for the co-chairs of our education committee, and certainly for the work of Michael and my other colleagues to make it happen. But lastly, to the support that our three sponsors have given us to allow us to underwrite some of the expenses, Edifax, Axway, and Smile CDR. I want to thank them for their contributions, their support. And again, I'll turn it back to you, Rob, to go over tomorrow's agenda.
Yeah, no, let me just add my thanks. In particular, John Kelly has just done a yeoman's job of working behind the scenes to make this program work. And of course, our own Lori Burkhart. So thanks so much to them. Tomorrow's agenda is really going to be, I think, interesting and unique for Weedy. We're really looking at some of the issues that we delved in today from the patient perspective. So we're going to start by having a conversation from the patient's perspective. We're going to have our own Samantha Holvey. John is going to join us, and Stephanie Livingston from the Arthritis Foundation to talk about some of the challenges that we've dealt with in HIT, but again, from the patient's perspective. And then we're going to be asking you to share some of your thoughts not as a HIT leader, but as a patient. So we're going to have some poll questions, and hopefully we'll get some good discussion in the chat. And then we're going to talk about some of the key challenges facing patients and the industry. And of course, prior authorization is right at the top. So we're going to have Anna Hyde from the Arthritis Foundation, Heather Mah-Kamas from the AMA, Craig Kinnear from Change Healthcare. We'll also talk about provider directory challenges. I think that's sort of one of the first ways that patients interact with the healthcare system, and it can be a painful one. So we'll hear from Alex Muggy from CMS, Christian Valdez from BeWell, our own Michelle Berry from Availity. And then we'll look at the past, present, and future of patient APIs. We'll have the Aju Jacob from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee, Banji Graham from HCSC, and Tony Benson from eSolutions. So we're going to end the day with an important discussion around patient privacy and security, because as we're liberating all of this patient data, the question is, how can we keep that data private and secure? And we really got a great lineup of panelists. Lucia Savage, who was formerly the head privacy officer for ONC, Keith Grant from Sutter Health, and Alice Leiter from EHI. So we've got a great lineup for tomorrow. I'm excited about it, and I hope you'll come back and join us. And with that, we will close the day, and we hope you have a good evening tonight.